Hello, everybody, and welcome to the 237th edition of the Frank and Stan chat. And the reason I go Frank and Stan chat is because when it comes up with notation, sort of subtitles about what's being said, this always comes up as Frankenstein. So that's the reason. Somebody dropped me an email this week saying, how funny it was. For those of us on 237 editions, we've got used to the joke. But anyway, that's the reason I go Frankenstein chat.
Frankenstein isn't a bad model. Something's bolted together from other people's skills.
Well, actually, somebody suggested, Stan, it should be Stan and Frank to get
Yeah,
over it. And I know we've spoken about that before, but I then thought, I think the reason why we didn't do that is that that might mean that you have to do a bit more work in setting
yeah.
it all up.
Don't put me at the forefront of any more work. I can't cope with what I've got. And technically, I'm
Right.
retired.
Well, I'm pleased to say if you're watching on video, you'll see that Chris Jones is with us. And it's fantastic to have you with us, Chris.
Thank you.
We've met a few
Thank you.
times and I've been on a podcast for you. And I have to say, I always enjoy reading your weekly newsletters. And that's going to be part of our discussion today. But Chris is CEO of Smart Curriculum. He's an author, a speaker. You've got your own podcast and yeah, just a damn good bloke. So it's always nice to have those sorts of colleagues with us. So thank you for your time this morning. Before we get into Chris and what he does, we always go to Stan. Stan, how are you this morning?
I'm fine this morning. I'm shop building today, so I'm in a bit of a rush to start building a counter in a pizza shop. I know that's not really educational, but it's what you have to do.
But in a way though, it shows the sort of range of skills that are required. As within your life
As
that
you
become
retire.
quite helpful. We were talking last night, my wife and I, about the hours that I spent in woodwork classes and in metalwork classes, wasting my time basically. But actually, now that I'm older, you realise, the fantastic skills that these people were offering us. If only we knew that they could, because at the time I didn't want to be a joiner. I didn't want. My father worked with metal in at Ford's in Basildon, and that was the last thing I wanted to do because I'd seen his hands when he came home full of shards of metal, and that was the last thing I wanted. So it just didn't excite me at the time. But how valuable now?
Well, so this week I've done plumbing, I've done a bit of safe electric, the things you can do, and now I'm building a canter, built furniture as well. So
Brilliant.
Yes, excellent. Right, Chris. So thank you for joining us. Do you want to just give a little bit of a background for people who've never seen you or heard of you and know who you are? Yes, what it is. How did you get to where you are now?
Well, 25 years teaching is the start point. So I began teaching in the sort of mid early 80s, and then worked as many of us do. I stayed in the classroom and in the schools. So in 2010, I was involved in the academisation process very early on in that. In fact, the academy I was part of creating was I think the third in the country in that. I mean, obviously there were the city academies, but the wholesale approach. It was a huge. It would have been the biggest in the country. 3,500 children, two
Wow.
sites. It was a big
Was that
event.
down in Essex, Chris?
That was down there. Actually, I was just reminiscing about your comment about Essex Ford and the Ford tractor plant because that was right on the edge of where I was teaching.
Yeah.
So Dale Farm, the Traveller, that was they were our catchment, and then the tractor plant, and then various other. That was East Basildon. My teaching career was mostly in Essex. I took a decision at that point to step out of it, and because my concentration had been on assessment curriculum, I was that curriculum deputy, curriculum lead. I stepped out because I had some colleagues. We were already supporting, I think, 6 or 10 other schools in that environment through the education action zones and wider work. And as many do, I decided to sort of step out into more independent work. And I often say to people, in 2010, I started the company that is now Smart Curriculum, and I've worked every day since. That's 15 plus years later. I've been all over the country. I've been into Europe, and now increasingly because of the pandemic and this environment. Yesterday, I think I had conversations in the UAE. Malaysia, Hong Kong. So but the concentration has always been on the curriculum ambition, the curriculum design, the shape for the children. What is it that what is our biggest ambition for learners? So that's why it's called smart curriculum, because our focus is there. And then we got involved in the school efficiency work. So I created a platform called Smart Curriculum Analytics that we work with schools on getting out of the deficits that many are in.
I mean, it's an interesting journey, though, isn't it? I mean, were you always sort of entrepreneurial, or is this just something that's grown? Did you ever think that you would set up create a business and it would be your livelihood for such a period of time?
I've reflected on that. So I remember going back to my NQT years, and I remember talking to my head of department, who was a toolmaker, so
Oh, right.
looking at Stan's background. And I remember saying, standing by the sink one day I'm going to own my own company, and I'm going to do something. I don't know what, but I'm going to do something. So, my degree was in design technology, so I am a design theorist. I am a at heart, problem solving was part of what I do, which is obviously a flavour of what we do now. It is about okay, so here are the parameters, what we're going to do, and there are lots of paths forward, and you can make decisions about it. But and I'm not going to tell you what I haven't got a fixed idea. It could be a number of things. So yes, in the sense of entrepreneurial, I guess that was built into me because that's the way I was trained in thinking.
Yeah.
Mm.
Amazing. Yeah, we first met at a Besser
Yes, it
event
was. Yes.
in London, and you came over to see me. And immediately that sort of you come over as quite infectious. You know, that sort of there's a nice professional enthusiasm about the way that you convey it, and yeah, that's been a constant feature, I think, of our connection. So it's very refreshing because at times you can easily get way down, but actually it's very nice to feel uplifted through these discussions.
To me, that's the way. I mean, I've often said, I've been in many head teachers' studies and sat down, and I hear the issues that they're facing, and yeah, there is stress, and yes, then there are occasionally tears, and anger, and thumping the wall, but it's actually my own demeanor is okay. I recognise that. Let's vent it. Let's get that out. Okay, now what are we going to do? How can I help you get that? And well, 15 years later, I can say it's obviously worked because I'm still doing it. So it's got some sense. But yeah, I thank you for that, Frank. And again, mutual admiration for the work of both of you and what you've done. It's about respecting other people's position and voice as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, I've never forgotten the fact that it's probably a lot easier just sitting in the room listening to the colleagues having to deal with it than actually having to
Yes,
deal with
that's
it
true.
themselves. So,
Mm.
right, okay, Stan, what's caught your eye this week?
Well, mainly because I've not had a lot of time for anything to catch my eye since we did the last one a couple of days ago. I was interested. I was obviously looking at funding in schools and how everybody's kind of clawing at it now, saying there just isn't sufficient money in schools for, particularly at the moment, for SEN, for schools that are struggling with children with complex needs that they haven't managed before and having to do all. So I just wondered, where is the money gone? Where, what's happened to the money? So I did a little bit of research, and it is only a little bit, to try and match what used to happen pre-academies in terms of the spend on pupils
Mhm.
rather than the spend on people above head teacher level, let's say. And I valued that at mainly primary, but at 90,000. So how many people are working now on 90,000 plus that weren't equivalent in pre um, academization? And it turns out it's something like 5 times as many people that are earned now. And I know it's just justified in some academies by saying yes, but it's a strategic role, these roles, and it's better for the children. We're doing more but actually, it's a heck of a lot of money that's not going into pupils now.
Mm.
And I just wonder whether the frightening bit was there's no data.
Well,
They,
actually, it's interesting because Chris, you were saying before, weren't you? There's a school efficiency element that you're involved in.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I
yeah,
mean,
but
just
the
one.
data to compare one against the other, there isn't. Well, according to AI, they can't find it, let's say.
It's
Um,
because they don't publish it.
yeah,
There is, and quite, obviously it's personal data. It's about people's salaries, and there is the limit. So they need to be publishing the 100,000 plus
yeah,
Yeah.
in units of 10,000. I understand that to me, there's a number of issues. One, I mean, the local authority obviously had a limited number of people that were on higher salaries,
yeah.
and but they did take the top slice off, so
They-
there was the regional fund. So there is a difficulty in looking at that efficiency. The thing I've asked right the way back from GM, the grant maintain status, is this agency approach. So productizing, things like the Ed Sykes and the welfare officers and so on, because they've now come down to sort of institutional level rather
Mm,
than larger organizational level. They're setting day rates where there's no correlation between what
no,
that means to the school. So I was talking to a school the other day and saying they're paying £500 an hour for an education psychologist
my goodness,
because that's all they can, because
they could
they're
all.
now running an agency, and that would never have been.
No,
no. And it's the number. If you multiply them, most academy trusts now, it seems to me, have somebody like an HR person.
Mm,
mm,
And now that would have been a small team in a local authority. It's now times by the number of, and it's that.
Matt, yeah, yeah, yeah.
And I don't see yet academies. I don't know whether there's a competition element about it, where they're not sharing that expertise across multi academy trusts.
yes,
To
yes,
say, well, we don't actually all need somebody paid at 90,000 to be the HR person, but maybe across 4 or 5 trusts we could do that.
Yeah, I think that's beginning to happen, Stan. I'd
Is it?
certainly, I'm a MAT director. I'm part of
mm,
a primary MAT, and that's certainly part of the narrative that we're moving into. And again, it's system maturity, isn't it? The big ideas at the beginning. I mean, it's taken a long time to get to this level, and I think you said quickly the competition element. There was very much the kind of divide between them as they've developed. But I think they're maturing. Sorry.
To be honest, I just found it locally a bit galling when sort of 3 or 4 primary schools got together and one of the heads immediately became the CEO and executive head,
Yeah.
and that took the best part of 200,000
Yeah.
mm,
out of a few schools for, I don't know, I would say for very little
yeah.
impact.
I think there's a philosophical thing at play here about, and actually there's pressures coming from the DFE. I remember when I was the co-op CEO, we had for a long time six academies, 3 secondaries and 3 primaries, and and they were quite isolated. You had one in Stoke, one in Manchester, and the rest in Leeds. There was a cluster in Leeds, which is fine. But we wanted to create more of a cluster in Stoke and Manchester, so we had to go to the regional director. Well, it's still Vicky Beer, but we'd have to go to the head teachers board and make a case. And there was an expectation that my view was I don't really want to employ specialist subject advisors on a permanent contract. It's just an approach I had. I thought, actually, I've done this advisory work before, and actually, after a while, you've used all you've used a lot of your cards in a way. So I thought it's best to have them on sort of fixed term contracts where there's more flexibility, and you could reduce hours or you could increase them as and when the need developed.
Mm.
But the expectation at the DFE was very much around you've got to have this big structure, as if to say you've then got the capacity to actually manage what may come if we were to give you 1, 2, 3 or more schools. So that actually added weight to the argument that that having more was best, and having them there. And so I think for me, I very much valued the HR, the ops side of it. You know, I think that they were functioning. Those colleagues that I work with functioning at a much higher level than some of the colleagues I'd met from within the local authority.
Mm.
But I think the bulk, you know, a question now whether or not, if there are cuts to be made, are those going to be made within that central team, or whether are they going to be made more at the school level? And that will be an interesting sort of to consider how that works over the next few years. Yeah.
I suspect classroom assistants will be the losers in this before anybody from a central team.
Mm. Yeah, well, it'll get to the heart of what the trust is, I suppose.
Stan, I'm careful how, because obviously and I've written some stuff as Frank said. There's an article I wrote called "The Hatchet or the Scalpel," and it's that, you know, and it's the sense that so many just hack at stuff,
Yeah.
and it's the easy wins. We capture our analytics as deep understanding, and I'd far rather get with a school leader or a trust leader. So, well, what is it that you're trying to achieve? What and who are the best people to
Mm.
achieve that? And where's the best spend? And I think that's a more intelligent professional approach than simply, you know, high level metrics that say, well, your full-time equivalent number is this, and your support staff is that. Because otherwise, you get into the slash and burn kind of
Yeah.
mentality. It's a
Yeah,
deeper understanding.
yeah, I agree. Chris, what's caught your eye this week?
I look, given the conversation we had at the beginning about our backgrounds, in fact, even Robert Halfon this morning has posted um, responding to the Labour Party, in fact, and the Conservative Party conversations around the needs of economics, the economic future of the nation, and they're challenging the academic, vocational. I particularly hate those two
Mm.
divide, but that idea. Obviously, the UTC and its involvement in the schools bill. I mean, that's been around for months, but just now there seems to be an energy around the skills agenda. I have some concerns that it's only being discussed post 16, but I
Yes,
am really interested
I
in fee levels.
Yeah.
yeah, we agree. I think we're in
Yeah.
accord with you on that. Yeah.
I so uh, the CEO of the Baker Deering Trust, her name's just gone ahead for it. Kate Ambrosi. She's really championing this UTC sleeve. That
Yeah.
this idea that there's a dimension of the UTC ethic within that can be delivered within a state sector secondary school. And why not? I mean, I've been doing that with schools for years in creating a kind of internal. But I think that there's an energy around what Robert Halfon is doing, what Jackie Smith is bridging between education and Department of Work and Pensions. I think if we can capture this, there's a real positive, and increasingly internationally, people are saying we're doing it, we're thinking about it. So that's sorry, that was not quick, but that was
No, no,
caught my eye.
it's interesting. I mean, because for those of you who don't have the well, I don't have a full-time job, so I'm sort of more on this than people that are actually sort of leading schools and teaching. But the some of the sort of previous education responsibilities that sat with the DfE have moved into DWP,
Mm.
and I just wondered, and all of those are related to. I mean, the way it's being viewed is around the development skills and the links to
Mm.
business. I'm just sort of, as we were saying before, you were mentioning about, well, it's a real pity if this is just viewed as a post 16 issue.
Mm.
Isn't this just hammering those nails into that approach by the minister, in effect moving part of the time, I think it's part of the time, into a different department?
Yeah, actually, this is what I reposted. Robert has put out, or Robert Halfon has put out this morning, and I should say the Right Honourable Robert Halfon.
Right, yeah.
Um, it, how is this going to change our educational perception of these two? Because as a design technology teacher, I was I was lower down the list to the maths, science, and English and languages, and it's these subjects, the creativity, the arts that are being
Oh, yeah.
squeezed out by English baccalaureate structure. But the thing that I find most challenging in working with leaders is when I go in and say, look, have you looked at the discount code list with the 385 qualifications? And they said, no,
Yeah.
can you give me a link? So, well, actually, this is your bread and butter. So you've got 385 qualifications. Did you know that only 50 of them are classified as technical? So there's only 13% of all the qualifications that they could do are in that bracket. And then, we go into the conversation that 168 of them are level 3, and most schools don't use them at Key Stage 4. So what's serviceable in that? We've got to challenge the thinking when leaders say to me, well, I've never seen the list and I didn't know that. And they don't know that they're divided by sectors, and you can do a sector analysis where you could look at how the breadth and balance is achieved. That's my concern around Professor Becky Francis' work on the curriculum assessment review, because we need real system change. We need real thinking change around how we perceive these things. So Robert Halfman, what he's doing is brilliant. And I think it's, we're championing it, but it is seen as post-16 skills.
Yes.
And yes, okay, it's vocational. I don't like the expression. I prefer professional, because it's, it raises the status in our thinking. But we've got some journey to go. So I can rattle on forever on this.
No.
Oh, that's fine.
My concern is that we've been, we're educators. We've been successful in the education system. We've been to university. Many of us, we've enjoyed the success of the education process. I sat in a study with a head and his senior team, so head of sixth form and curriculum lead, and asked the question, because you've confidently said to me that 50% of your sixth formers go off to university. So just as a matter of interest, where did the other 50% go? The room went deathly quiet. They all looked at each other with kind of, I measured it as slight embarrassment, and the head looked at me and said, Chris, I can't answer the question. I have no idea. I don't know. We've never asked. I said, well, think about that. Think about that journey, because you've put heart and soul into 100% of your learners, but you're only interested in where 50% of them end up. So, and the truth is, they went to apprenticeships, they went to jobs with training. So champion it, shout it, do something, structure for it. That's the bit that's caught my eye, but it always will, because that's the bit.
Funnily, I've just been working with a secondary school that are considering as one of their performance targets using neat figures, which would mean they would need to track students as they left. So maybe that's something that could be brought in nationally, where not as a stick to beat schools with again, but something that says, you need to be able to answer this question of where have your students gone within 2 years of leaving the school.
There's a lot to say. I mean, what I often use in the kind of talking that I do, we measure what we value, and we value what we measure. So what is it that we really are going to value? So it's not just university entrance. So yes, I mean, so how many go into apprenticeships? How many of them go into work with training? Not just the top level, 92% are in employment, education, training, but where are they? What are they doing? And champion it.
It's interesting. We in the Northern Powers Partnership, the work I was doing there was quite a lot of discussion. I think there's an ongoing study at the moment tracking students in northern secondary schools as they progress into their mid to late 20s, because obviously there is a relationship between an apparent relationship between the qualifications you get when you leave school and your likely earnings further down the line. But actually what we were keen to do is that's good for the broad picture. It gives you a broad picture. But are there some secondary schools that actually appear to perhaps not have the highest academic achievement, but actually their students are actually successful as they move into their adult life. So, and that may well be picking up on the point you made, not using the word vocational, but want to use the word professional. But they've gone down a professional route that involves them either setting up business on their own or working in a craft or whatever. Just to see whether or not there were some approaches being developed by some schools which we were not, well, say sort of take 10 years to germinate or whatever it may be.
Mm.
So that work is ongoing at the moment. So it will be interesting to see if there are some, sort of different places out there. Probably the school's not fully aware of it, but they might be committed, philosophically committed to an approach that
Yeah.
may be working in the longer term.
I use the terminology that's being used because it's familiar there. So
Mm,
the vocational universities, and I mean, I've spoken to many that get to the point of level 7 degree apprenticeships, and so let's reward them and award them in the same way. So why don't they have postnomials?
mm,
Why isn't there the possibility of saying, look, this is brilliant what I've done, and it's equivalent to. We still have that academic, non-academic kind of mindset. I think that, and that's where I'd say about breaking into the thinking and our values around this whole process. But it's a good place to begin. My concern is we've got to get it further down the line. So I mean, we do our sector analysis right from primary. So what do the 15 sectors look like? So this is about breadth and balance. Why why do we just focus on the parental conversation around the dining table? Well, there's 18 sectors in the qualifications, 15 of them are used in secondary schools. So why don't we talk about all of them and not just the 5 that are academic oriented?
yeah.
And it is only a third of the sectors. So
Well, my 3-year-old grandson has got his picture on the classroom wall, and it says his name, and underneath it says future engineer.
brilliant,
Because
wonderful.
they've talked to the children, they've observed them, and nominally given them a career path.
Yeah, yeah. That's exactly it, and that's the
Fantastic.
setting aspiration and
Yeah.
ambition, and yeah, brilliant. But
Well, what's caught my eye, and it's bringing it back to you, Chris. I wrote an article this week. It's going to be shared with some colleagues in the next couple of weeks, where I reflected on the Professor John Tomlinson, who was the Director of Education in Cheshire for about 13 or 14 years, and then went on to Warwick University. But he, had a lot of he was quite creative in his thinking. So Stan, residential centres, that was a Tomlinson thought. He was a big proponent of comprehensive education. But one thing that he did develop was the School Curriculum Award. And this is something that ended in 2002. It ran for 20 years and about 1,700 schools were successful in it. Now, the Schools Curriculum Award was around place. It was about connecting the institution, the school, to the community in which it was serving, and utilizing all the opportunities that presented for learning, but also engaging with the community, so that the school wasn't just an academic place. It was not a place just of learning. It was a place of bringing people together. And I was really struck, Chris, by, and if you, I'll put a link on at the end. But if I would subscribe to Chris Jones's weekly blog newsletter, because this week it just aligned so neatly that your newsletter spoke about what's been going on in Estonia and how there has been a sort of enthusiasm or a sort of reconsideration of what the purpose of education is, and there's a very strong emphasis on some decision making being at a really local level, but actually within a framework which enables the government to drive initiatives forward which are important for the economy and for the future of the country, like AI, for example. So I just felt as though you were talking about what you were talking about. Estonia would have got the Schools Curriculum Award. And I just wondered if you wanted to just say a little bit more about your newsletter this week, which I just found it so neatly captures what's been going on.
it's we've concentrated on curriculum for all the time that smart curriculum has existed, and it's been really interesting to have conversations with leaders. I mean, I've not been into the kind of seats of power and that yourselves have, but it's great to talk to people. And it was actually during the summer, Frank, partly a conversation that you and I had earlier in the year, and then so connections like Mina Woods and others that have really drawn those sort of conversations together, and it prompted me to look up some of the things. And actually, there'll be some other conversations. So there's some other things that I've been looking at. I'm no expert on Estonia, but it turns out that I've got colleagues that are in those areas and talking about what's going on. And I was struck with Estonia. It's a small nation, about 1.4 million people. And in that kind of environment, there's this autonomy for regional development where professionalism is high on the agenda. And so they're responding to things like AI. Now we know in the UK there's lots of conferences and there's lots of discussion, but they've really kind of at national level, they've got this AI Leap 2025, which is the document they've put together. They've considered it at depth. I would suggest that Wales is doing similarly.
Yes,
There's some stuff going on
Yeah.
there in that way. But it's built around professional autonomy. There's that sense of which leaders have got the ability to, respond and design. I fear that we tend to move to the compliance model very quickly, so everybody's got to do the same thing. Although I think obviously there is space within our system to shape that. So my response here was really just to champion some of the real positive things that are going on around the world. So if you do want to read, I'm astounded. It's just little old me writing what my response. So 4,000 people a week are reading the thing is mind blowing to me. But I'm grateful for that shout out. But they genuinely felt what I can see, and I put in there this actually, Frank, the conversation that we had around the metropolitan mayors and their influence on education area, particularly there's obviously Andy Burnham is very high in that agenda. I saw great parallels with it. I mean, it's actually probably more people than Estonia is
Yes. Well, I think isn't Estonia about the same size as Greater Manchester anyway?
Yes. So in the sense of what's going on, I mean, obviously I will champion it because the skills agenda that's been brought into the Manchester environment, Greater Manchester, is quite inspiring, and that has some parallels. But it's just that local autonomy. Looking at people talking about Finland and Australia, New Zealand, and Singapore. There are lots of nations that are beginning to question. In fact, I yesterday had conversations with some leaders from the UAE and Dubai and Abu Dhabi that are looking similarly, and they're asking the same questions. So I think there's a momentum around the whole agenda here, and it's so there's a national objective. We could say the same of the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. They're doing the same. There's a national kind of objective, and here clearly it's an economic plan for us and moving forward, but then giving regional priority so that there's autonomy to make decisions and empower. But then that agency is what we want to establish in children. That's the future. Hence your question, Stan, around that entrepreneurship, and so I want to see. To me, entrepreneurship is not just simply creating businesses. It's the mindset of I can, and we can,
and things like resilience, because sometimes you can't, and you have to think a different way or approach things in a different way. What I don't want to do is encourage the kind of enterprise stuff that went on in primary schools when I was teaching, which nothing ever failed. No mini enterprise ever failed. So that the parents would always buy the yogurt pot with a stick in it, silver on the outside at £1.50. I think you have to design things where there's an element of it needs a lot more work before it's a success, if you like.
Well,
I want success, but I want it to be more realistic maybe than it was under Mini Enterprise.
Well, I can bring this all to a close because I think neatly is that I was watching an interview with a British Nobel Prize winner. I think it was for physics, and he was interviewed, and he said, "Well, I believe you were ranked 250th out of 250 students for science at your secondary school." And he said, "Yes." He said, "And I have that on my wall." He says, "A reminder that if you're breaking new ground, you get used to failing,
Mm.
you know." And actually, that I failed a lot at secondary school, and I've never forgotten it because it was what made me what I am. I got used to failing.
Yeah.
And he said, I didn't enjoy reading, so I was really sort of stuffed. But actually, without realizing it, he was inquisitive, and he wanted to find things out. But that sense of failure is what made him into a Nobel Prize winner. So yeah, not suggesting that everybody's got to get, well, we've all got to get used to failing, haven't we? Somewhere along the line.
It's about not accepting failure. It's about using
Yes.
failure to rethink and replan and challenge again. It's not about saying right, giving up. It's the resilience to say, well, that didn't work. How can I rethink that so it does work?
Yeah.
Well,
And
that's
so
great.
right and wrong answers are not the only thing.
No.
Well, it's been a great chat, Chris. Thank you so much for your time this morning. And we are back next week with another weekly Frankenstein chat. Yeah, and I think Stan and Chris have got some chatting to do after this recording, I think. So anyway, we'll see you next week. And thank you very much. Bye-bye, everyone.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks.